Want to welcome everyone today to another edition of Beyond the Headlines. I am Glenn Smith. I am the Watchdog and Public Service Editor for the Post and Courier. And with me today are Thad Moore, who's a Senior Projects Reporter, and Andrew Whitaker, who's one of our most talented photojournalists. And they are here to talk about the Lizardman story that they did last weekend. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that the event is being recorded. It will be sent out afterwards with contact information in case you have any additional questions you'd like to throw our way. Also, I'd like to encourage people to submit the questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. 34 years ago this year, something crawled out of the Scape or swamp in Bishopville and scared the daylights out of people. And there's talk of a 7-foot monster with red eyes and skin like a lizard. And it just catapulted rural Lee County into the national spotlight and spawned this legend that lives on to this day. The story we're talking about here today actually had its roots about 3 years ago. We first started talking about doing this thing, and it had fits and starts along the way. But Thad and I were talking about this yesterday, and neither of us could remember actually what got us onto the topic in the first place. But we recalled sitting there in a lonely Christmas Eve in the Post and Courier offices. I think we were the last two people left, and somehow we got talking about Lizardman, and that led us to Robert Howell's Lizardman Lodge, and we bought some Lizardman swag to make us feel better on that day. Thad, can you tell us a little bit more about it? We'll show you just to prove that I have the Lizardman t-shirt on here that we bought that day.
Actually, I brought my mug too, so
Tremendous.
Felt like appropriate for the occasion. Yeah, I don't really remember how we got onto it either, but it was just one of those things where, you're just kind of killing time. There's nothing going on the holidays. And however we got onto it, we just kind of became fascinated with the story. And I guess we just were reading about it and started to notice some sort of interesting contours around the Lizardman. And you mentioned Robert Howell's Facebook page. So that was actually sort of I think a significant part, if I remember right, is that he was posting on there at the time about how he really thought Bishopville should embrace the legend more. And maybe they should have a festival. And, at one point he was sort of expressing his frustration that hadn't happened more. And that just sort of interested me on two levels. One, the question for me became like, what makes somebody care about this legend so much? I think at the time I sort of figured statewide it was sort of viewed as this kind of silly story, and it was kind of maybe seen as a little bit of a joke. But it seemed like it really meant something, at least to him, that it was really something special. And at the same time, the thing that interested me was, well, yeah, why wouldn't they have a festival? Like, it is sort of one of their claims to fame as a town. The fact that there seemed to be resistance was itself interesting. So that kind of got us thinking. And we talked about doing this story forever. COVID got in the way, things like that. But yeah, that was sort of the tension. It just seemed like there was something in there. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but it was enough to get me interested. And yeah, I thought about it every time once a week I use this mug. So I had a constant reminder that we need to do this story.
And Thad would also think about it during his annual evaluation, because every year for the past 3 years, I've actually put Lizardman's story in one of his goals in his annual performance evaluation.
It's a miracle I have a job.
So this year it'll actually come off that evaluation. It's a cause for celebration. But it was more about, like, one good thing about the Post and Courier, we're not afraid to have fun a little while, every once in a while, and we do a lot of very serious stories and very trying stories, and this one just seemed kind of a fun exploration. So we finally decided this year we're going to do this thing. We're going to devote everything to the Lizardman. And I go talk to Andy, who had been expressed a lot of interest in it as well. And I said, Andy, we're going to do the story this year. We're going to get back on it. And he said, what do you mean back on it? I've been on it for 3 years now. And I said, what? And he shows me this giant treasure trove of photos and images and videos and all these things. Talk a little bit about that. What have you been up to during that time? And what got you so like into this story?
Yeah. So I guess the first time I heard about the Lizardman, you guys are already talking about that. We were doing a story about the Lee prison. And I remember we went to the Cotton Museum. I think we got that a t-shirt there. And then we walked the swamp. And I think after that, I started just kind of, I don't know, I just didn't want to wait around. And so I think I reached out to Robert Howell on the Lizardman Facebook page, and he immediately got a hold of me. And I remember driving up to his house in North Carolina just to talk with him. And then COVID kind of happened. So it kind of was put on pause for a while. But it's like one of those things where I didn't want to sit around and wait. I wanted to start doing more research myself and kind of, going up there, checking it out, because it's like one of those things that's kind of hard to photograph. So I really didn't know how to go about this. So it was more of like trying to do this planning and just kind of talking to people in the town, to seeing where it would go from there. But yeah, I just wanted to keep going with it.
Okay. So Thad, as you started on your reporting on this, I mean, obviously this happened 34 years ago, right? 1988. How'd you go about trying to find people who had these strange encounters around Bishopville, and what was their response about being contacted? How did they feel about the legend?
Yeah, it's sort of a mixed bag, which was kind of to that earlier point, what made this so interesting. So part of the challenge with this is that because so much time has passed, a lot of people who reported something or had something strange happen to them, many of them have died just with the passage of time. So it was a challenge. Like how do you sort of tell the story of the legacy of this thing, or how do you tell the story of this creature if you can't find anybody who has really experienced something with it? So what I did is there's a couple books and sort of accounts of what happened. One's by Lyle Blackburn. It's like really comprehensive. So kind of going off of those accounts, I sort of made a list of every sort of strange encounter that anybody had reported. Many of them are named because they like had police reports that they filed, things like that. So then I just tried to figure out, one, are they still alive? And then two, if not, like who are their closest living relatives? And then I just wrote letters to them. I probably sent like a dozen or more letters to people who had some connection, either asking, what did you see? What do you think about there's like this sort of resurgence of interest in the Lizardman in the last few years. So what do you make of that? Like, do you, is it something you're proud of? Is it something you're embarrassed by? Do you feel like you're being made fun of? Like, what is it to you? And same for relatives. Do you feel like people are making fun of your father, or do you feel like this is sort of honoring their experience? And I didn't really hear much back. I got a few calls back from people who didn't really remember anything. Like one was this pilot had seen something. His second wife wrote back or called back and said, yeah, he never really talked about it, so I don't really know much, and he's no longer alive. And then in one case, there was a woman who called who she was younger when this happened. And she said that, so I'm trying to, she didn't want to be named, so I'm trying to not identify her too much. But basically, she said that her family had been sort of burned by the experience. They felt like they had been made fun of. They never said they saw the Lizardman. They just said they saw something come out of the woods while they were driving through. And so they were sort of put off by the whole thing. Because they kind of felt like they were being made fun of, and their statements have been used on like cable TV documentaries, and every time it comes up, they get phone calls from people asking like, I didn't know you saw the Lizardman. And they say, no, it's not what I said. And it it sort of frustrates them. And actually, when I talked to her mother, she recommended I talk to her mother. As soon as I said the word Lizardman, she hung up on me, which is just like a really intense, it's like kind of this like thing. It's like we think, it's sort of this silly thing, lighthearted thing. But, in that case, it really wasn't, which I think was really fascinating. So yeah, I think I just rambled around your question, but it was sort of interesting. Like, it's just not exactly what I expected it to be. It was a lot more delicate than I think I was expecting.
Yeah, there was, to a lot of people, this is a serious thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think you communicated that well in the story. Now, Andy, you, in some ways, you had an even more difficult task because you're set out to illustrate this elusive creature that hasn't been seen, no sightings in years and years and years. And no one's ever captured the Lizardman on camera. So how do you go about, as a photographer, how do you go about illustrating this story with when the main character isn't there?
Yeah. So, like I said early on, kind of just, I wanted to see, different people, meet them, just talk to them. And then I end up stumbling upon different like Lizardman events. Like I remember I was camping at the state park and there was this Lizardman scavenger hunt on horseback. Had no idea until I started talking to, I think, the park ranger. And I'm like, oh, that works out because I'm kind of here for a story about the Lizardman. And so then it kind of got me thinking about like, so what exactly is the Lizardman? I don't think I'm going to get a photo of this 7-foot creature. So it's kind of a combination of two things. And one was going to like Scape or Swamp and trying to capture a photo that represents the mood or like the idea of like what I want you to, you see this image and you feel what people that saw the Lizardman feel. So the idea of photographing these like long exposures, with lights, this creepy, eerie, like I want you to be able to, I want this photograph to make you feel like you're in the swamp at night. And on top of then all these different, the culture around the Lizardman. So you have a combination of what exactly is the Lizardman. It's like this feeling, and then also it's everybody that were like selling t-shirts and, being something from that. And, anywhere between the scavenger hunts to the Lizardman Stomp Festival to the Little Miss Lizardman beauty pageant. I mean, those are all elements of the story that you kind of want to capture, that for the visual aspect of this. But basically you want to be able to feel the story, then you also want today's story with all these different events.
Very true. Very true. So Thad, after you go and talk to all these folks, you come away. How has Bishopville's sort of view of the Lizardman changed over the past 34 years? How do people view the whole thing today, and how has that evolved?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think it's sort of at a moment of flux, it seems like a little bit. So for a long time, it just seems like it was not talked about much. There's not a whole lot, or wasn't a whole lot when you were driving into town that would tell you like this is where this happened. And if you go to the swamp, like the swamp is actually like a really long sort of lowland area. There's a creek that runs through it. But there's sort of one bridge where it had been sort of like this tourist destination in the summer of 1988. And there's like nothing marking it. I mean, there's a sign that says that it's the swamp, but there's nothing special about it. It's just a highway bridge in a swamp. So it kind of was sort of shoved away. I think a lot of people were sort of burned by the feeling of being made fun of in the national press, which, like, if you look at the clippings from the time, it's very obvious that there was a lot of tongue-in-cheek writing happening. Like, just a lot of people like, oh yeah, like, people said they saw a lizard man. And so I think people know when they're being made fun of or not being taken seriously, and don't take well to that. So it was sort of put away. And I think what's been interesting is that as time has gone by, as people with sort of direct connections, it's sort of as a new generation takes over, there's sort of a more of a warming to it. It becomes sort of like a local identifier. sort of a sense of place. I on our podcast that we did about this, sort of compared it to the palmetto tree in South Carolina in a way, where like there's history that there's a reason historically we have the palmetto tree because they built a like a barricade or a fort out of trees. But that's not really why like you see palmetto trees on people's trucks or on like belts or whatever. It's just sort of like a sense of place, and I think that that's sort of what I think that's what the Lizardman is becoming for Bishopville. It's becoming like a local signifier. There was the Lizardman Stomp event this year, sort of a first attempt at having sort of a locally run festival that really celebrates the Lizardman. There had been a festival once before, and some people, including like Robert Howell, felt like it was too much about other things like comics and not enough about the Lizardman and sort of Lee County. So I think that that evolution is sort of happening. And the reception actually for that event was really good. It's kind of hard to estimate crowds, but over the course of like basically a morning and afternoon, they had probably 500, 600, 700 people come through. And I think there was enough encouragement for them to take another shot at it next year. I saw somebody ask that question. I don't think they have a date for the next one, but I expect it'll be next June. It was late June this year. So yeah, I think that there's sort of a warming embrace because people are seeing that this is sort of an opportunity for the town, and it's a way to get on the map. I think previously Bishopville was happy to not be on the map if this is what was going to put them there. But I think that that tide is turning a little bit.
So about like a month ago, I guess, I'm sitting at home on a Friday night at about 10 o'clock at night, and I get this text from Thad, this picture of his rent-a-car by the side of the road by the swamp, and he said, you know, out here with Andy, who's out in the woods. Not my favorite idea of like how to spend a Friday night or something to that effect. So Andy, you went out there several times at night, and to get a sense of the swamp and spend some time out there. Can you tell people a little bit about what that's like? I mean, what that does to your imagination, if you had any odd encounters out there yourself?
Yeah, so I went a few times to that swamp at night because, you know, to do these, like, I mean, most of these sightings happen, you know, late at night. You kind of don't know, you know, what you're seeing necessarily. So I wanted to capture that. And I kind of felt like, I don't know, the first time I went out there, I was just kind of creeped out. I mean, like there's, you know, you go down this hill and it's a lot darker down in the swamp than it is up, you know, along Browntown Road. I don't know, it's something back, I mean, swamps have some weird noises. I mean, there's some things that you just don't know. I mean, they're probably like, you know, frogs or cicadas, but just being by yourself there is just so creepy. And I don't know, it was just it was helpful to have Thad there, even he didn't join me in the woods. But I remember going back like a week or two later without him because I wanted to try something new. And you know, he kind of long exposures, kind of just try something and see if it works, and you try something different. But I remember going out, I got some photos, and I hear like this tree fall in the middle of the woods, and I mean, it's pitch black, and I'm hearing these weird noises and cars going by, and I remember just grabbing everything and just kind of basically saying, "I'm okay. I think I got what I need," and you know, going back to my car. But I don't know. I think it also like sparked of like getting these audio images of what I heard, because I mean, you don't see anything, you're just hearing things, and your imagination runs crazy. And that's like the cool thing about being down there, because I mean, I remember a lot of stories I've done throughout my years as a photographer, but I'm always going to remember those sounds you hear in the swamp. So I don't know, it's kind of been a fun, I don't know, journey to try to, you know, replicate that, you know, to show, you know, to our readers and viewers. But yeah, it was very creepy.
Andy's not saying this. He texted me that night at 9:30 at night. I didn't even know if I knew he was up there. And I just get a text out of the blue that says, "I think I just saw the Lizardman."
That's when the tree fell. I think I just grabbed my lights and I don't know. I just kind of was like, yeah, I'm done. I'm good for now.
What was the bug level out there in the swamp? I was curious about that.
Not as bad as
Not
I
as bad as you
thought
think,
it would
yeah.
be. It's, we're in South Carolina and
In
in
the
the
summer,
summertime. Yeah. But I thought it would be a lot worse. I mean, I don't know. I remember photographing fireflies in, Congaree, and that was a heck of a lot worse, but it was better than I thought. I also didn't go like that far into the. I mean, you could still hear the road. I mean, which is good. That's like a safety thing. But yeah, no, I thought it'd be a lot buggier. I mean, I prepared myself, long sleeve shirts and bug spray, but didn't really feel that bad.
Okay. The story for me worked in such a great way because it had so much humanity to it, right? I mean, I've seen some people do stuff on this in way back years past where they sort of went out there and they're hunting in the swamp for the Lizardman, and it was sort of one of those like a Bigfoot show on TV or something where they're searching there. And we decided not to do that, and you focused more on the characters, I guess, a real developed sort of human characters. And you showed a lot of humanity, both in the Sheriff Truesdale and Robert Howell and the Harry and Harry 2 folks. And just it means a lot to people. It's part of their lives. It's woven into a thread. Why did you feel it was so important to treat, like you say, it's been a kind of a punchline of things on late night TV in the past. Why did you feel it was so important to kind of show the humanity and to show that it really means something to this town?
Yeah. Well, okay. So the first is a pragmatic answer, which is if we were trying to do a story in which we go hunting for the Lizardman, there's sort of two possible outcomes. One is nothing happens, and that's a really lame story. The other is we see something, and I have to stake my career on I saw the Lizardman. So I wasn't really willing to do that. But I mean, actually, like, really what it is I kind of came to the point where, I mean, people ask me, like, do you think it's real or was real, or, what's your theory of the Lizardman? And I think at this point, it's kind of irrelevant, because this is a thing that Robert Howell says a lot. Like, the legend is a legend now, regardless of what happened, whether it was a prank or, there was an animal, or whether there's a Lizardman. Like, not in any scenario, it's still the legend now. So what I was sort of interested in is, what does it mean to the town now? Why is it that people care about this, one way or the other? Like, why is it that people are invested in this thing that was sort of this kind of fun or interesting moment in the limelight for this small town? And I think a lot of that is just nostalgia. It's people sort of hearkening back to just sort of a particularly fun summer, or in the case of the sheriff's niece, it's sort of a way of remembering him and his legacy as a sheriff. She had this really fascinating point that because he's so central to the Lizardman story, as long as the Lizardman story is talked about in Lee County, so will her uncle. So it's sort of a messenger that sort of carries that moment forward. So I thought that was really interesting. And I just thought that was more interesting than what really happened, because that was explored a lot at the time. And there's no way that you're ever going to make a definitive answer. But what is interesting is why it's sort of still important to the town today. And, it is that's what's so fascinating to me, is that it has this staying power for more than 3 decades. It's really kind of wild when you think about it.
And Andy, so what's next for you? I mean, do you plan on going up there and continuing the hunt, or you talked about maybe going to the Mothman Festival in West Virginia? You've sort of got the cryptid bug.
Yeah, I mean, like, kind of an idea of why I wanted to do this is I love doing those oddity, like, unique stories, kind of like Lizardman. I remember a few years ago I did something on the UFO Welcome Center. It just kind of makes those like fun things, these stories in South Carolina, just fun to tell. And I mean, we did something shortly on like the Polly's Island Gray Man, but I don't know, I guess I got to find the next unique Palmetto State story to work on.
Yeah, if people haven't seen it, definitely we should send in that link too when we send this out. We'll send you a link to Andy's UFO Welcome Center story. That was a real treat as well. And if you've never been up to Bowman, it's worth the trip. It's definitely an odd site. We did have a question from a reader again. I think Thad, you touched on this about do you think they're going to have another one next year? And someone asked where you can buy Lizardman merch. I don't know who's Andy. You want to field that one?
Yeah, I mean Robert Howell actually messaged me after the story ran, and he's like, so same time next year. And so I'm guessing they plan on doing something. Hopefully, we'll see if there's gonna be a parade or maybe a statue. I don't know. I mean, I know they have pretty big hopes, and it's a site I definitely want to go back. Regardless if we do a story or not. But I know the Cotton Museum has some T-shirts there. I think if you go to Robert Howell's like the Lizardman Lounge Facebook page, he has a ton of unique, T-shirts and I don't know mugs, and I don't know, he has even like the footprint magnets there. But both of those are pretty good. Probably the Facebook page because he's pretty quick on getting back to you. But yeah, he has some pretty cool designs.
If you search Facebook for Lizardman Stomp and just follow that page, I'm sure they'll be posting about when the next event will be. And yeah, I mean, Robert sells merch. There's no obviously officially sanctioned merch because, who would sanction it? But he sells merch, and yeah, the Cotton Museum is another one, but I don't think you can get that online.
Getting the intellectual property rights from the Lizardman might be challenging for sure.
Yes. Well, he would have to show up in court, so that's an issue.
Yeah, that would blow the whole thing right there. So
there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of our time here. I want to thank everyone for watching. Remember, you can sign up for any of our free newsletters at postingcourier.com/newsletter-sign up. If you're a subscriber, we'd always like to give you a big hearty thank you. And if you're not, you can sign up at postingcourier.com/subscribe. So until next time, wish everybody a great day, great week. And thank you, Thad and Andy. It's always fun.